To get things started, I'd like to introduce you to Jason Solomon, partner at Alston Bird, and his colleague Gabriel Walsh, Director of Legal Technologies and Consulting Services. Jason has spent his entire career focused on corporate transactions, financial regulations, and the related litigation. On the flip side, Gabriel has extensive experience solving technical problems and e-discovery challenges by leveraging advanced technologies, innovative thinking, and creative strategies. I literally had to pull the two of them from the trenches of an active LIBOR mediation project so they could share their experiences with us today on our first business challenge, LIBOR Transitions. Gabriel and Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Good to be here.
Our pleasure. So let's jump into it. I really feel like there's like new financial regulations happening all the time. And, really, it's really for the big, banks or Wall Street. And ultimately, like we see, but don't really feel or understand the impacts of like tariffs, embargoes, like major events like Brexit. But LIBOR just feels and seems different. And can you just help us understand, if anyone's not familiar, what exactly is LIBOR and where does it stand today?
So LIBOR is the London Interbank Offered Rate. It's basically the floating rate index for pretty much every floating rate mortgage, credit card, student loan, complicated financial instrument, securitizations make use of it. It's pretty much ubiquitous across the financial industry. The reason we're here talking about it, right, is, over the course of, the last roughly 5 to 10 years, some questions have arisen around whether LIBOR is measuring what it's supposed to measure, right? So what it's supposed to measure is how banks lend to each other at overnight rates in London. Some issues came up with the I'll call it the trustworthiness of that rate. And as a result, by the end of 2021, there isn't going to be a LIBOR. And so that's a pretty big thing, right? Because, mortgages, student loans, credit cards, financial instruments, we're talking about literally trillions of dollars of financial instruments that have some LIBOR component to them. So when it ends, obviously that is a massive universe of contracts and paper that are going to have to be resolved in some way, right? If your interest rate basis no longer exists, well, you still need to charge an interest rate. Yeah. And so that's the issue, right? Is how do we deal with all these floating rate instruments that are pegged to LIBOR, starting January 1, 2022.
And the thing that's so interesting to me about LIBOR too is that you not only have this massive universe, but it's massive documents, right? Like these instruments are super complicated. They're sometimes hundreds of pages. And when I think about that, the tech side of me immediately starts thinking like, okay, structured data. We got to figure out how to structure this. So why is it important to get that data, particularly to LIBOR, in a structured state?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? I think you're right. I think there's every kind of document. In the ones that we've worked on, I've seen 2-page documents that have something to do with the contract, right? That might be an add-on, but absolutely, there's 200, 300, 500-page documents as well, right? Dozens of appendices and things like that. So I think you're right. I mean, in some ways, a LIBOR contract analysis is like any other diligence type contract analysis, right? You have to go through clauses and you have to carve them out. And so structured helps with that in general, right? You're taking sort of unstructured language and you're figuring out the parts that matter to you, right? The clauses that matter to you, the subparts that matter. LIBOR is also different though, and in a pretty material way, because the thing you're analyzing, unlike where you're doing a diligence just to see what your legal risk is for acquiring a company, let's say, here you're analyzing something akin to the Y2K bug, right? So you're analyzing this thing that's got a date specific that it's going to happen. It's happening at the end of next year, so December 2021, right? It's written in sort of hard to read language and hard to find problems, right? And there's nothing different about contracts than programming on some levels, right? You're writing this very complicated programmatic thing. And it's inside of lots of little clauses that are hard to rewrite, and it has to get rewritten. So there's one material way it's totally different, right? Y2K, we weren't sure what was going to happen. We were all scared, but a lot of it didn't come to fruition, right? Because it ended up being okay, or the programs solved themselves, right? Some people wrote around them, but a lot of people didn't. A lot of people ignored it, and they were okay. You can't do that with LIBOR. So that's the worst part is you can't ignore it. It's not going away. It's going to either end you up in litigation or sending out notices and amendments or repapering your documents or hopefully negotiating these things. But you have to figure it out. But the structured side of that is there's a lot of different paths that a LIBOR contract could send you down. So it's not specific. It's not, there's other ones, force majeure or conflict of laws. There's provisions that you have to find. They might be broad, but they're not going to send you down like 700 different paths depending on the way the contract was written. LIBOR will. You might have to do all sorts of different things. And getting that organized using a combination of text analytics tools, of textual near duplicate clause analysis tools and comparisons, of general text extraction and search, and then having a database, right? The structured part comes into carving those pieces out and putting them into a database, and having the ability to, review and code and either bulk code or do things, put that in a database. So, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head that it's sort of, it both doesn't lend itself at all to structured because it's these big amorphous documents, and simultaneously the results demand structured, both for their determination and also all the paths of remediation, right? So the tasks that have to happen, the paths that you have to go down, you need to track that in a way you can defend back later that you did it across, a whole portfolio.
Yeah, I would just, probably layer on top of that, from the lawyer side of this equation, right? The scope is massive potentially, and it is massive for a lot of the banks and financial institutions out there, and getting your arms around what your documents say, right? You can do it a lot of different ways. But as Gabriel said, you kind of got to get it to a point where there are identifiable pieces to that universe, right? If you have to go through 100,000 documents and read each one and try to figure out, on a one-by-one basis how you're going to approach those. One, you're going to have inconsistent results, and two, you're going to have just a manpower issue, right? Just the size and the scope is unbelievable. So getting, using tools like Heretic and others to sort of get your arms around the universe and get it into a place where it is structured and where you've broken out clauses and you've found sort of the hidden provisions, using the tools to help you with that then allows you to put on top of that structure, right, the legal analysis and the financial analysis and the economic analysis that banks, financial institutions, other corporations need to put on top of it to solve the problem, right? It's not, what's interesting about LIBOR is it's not just, oh, we have a problem and, we'll see what happens. It is, oh, we have a problem. We need to figure out what steps we need to take to solve for it before it's too late. And keeping things structured and organized, it's the only way to do it.
So with that being said, you kind of mentioned like force majeure as an example, and with COVID, right? You would find the force majeure clause and analyze it. And so, just speaking of COVID, did COVID impact this transition at all? And then, if it did, did that delay anything, or ultimately, is it too late to start? And if you haven't started, what would you guys suggest for the audience to get going?
Certainly, COVID is, we're all dealing with that in some way, and so certainly that took precedence, I think, for a lot of clients and financial institutions and banks out there, and understandably so, right? That was a challenge we're all facing. So what it probably did was slow down the pace a little bit in some areas. I don't know that I would say it's too late to ever start. At this particular moment in time, probably the things you should be doing, if you haven't already, get your arms around your universe, right? So as Gabriel said, collect your documents, get your database together, and that will allow you to start to assess, all right, how big of an issue is it? And like I said, it's not too late. This is technically an end of 2021 problem, but it's going to take time to once you do the legal analysis to layer in the solutions, right? So as Gabriel said, we've been throwing around the term remediation. Well, remediating a LIBOR problem can mean a lot of things. Certainly there are going to be some large universe of transactions that require an amendment, right? And that's going to take time. You're going to have to reach out to the people who are involved in that particular transaction and paper it. You're going to have some where you probably just don't have a good solution baked in, right? Or an amendment can't get done. So you have to prepare yourself legally for how you're going to address that. So those are big things to do. And when you're talking about a large universe of documents and a LIBOR provision sort of buried throughout, it's important that you start soon, right? It's not too late, but you should probably start soon, because I think if you get to the middle of next year and you haven't sort of started your process to remediate the problem, then you're starting to push up on the point in time where maybe it's a little too late. Yeah. So, certainly not too late. Is it time? Yeah. Should you get your arms around your universe of information? Yes. And then you should hire, the people who can help you get through it, like us, use tools like Heretic, right, to sort of get your arms around the info, organize it, structure it in a way that allows the analysis to be layered on top, and then sort of get down that path.
Yeah. No, I really feel like this is one of those things where you gotta get started. Like, even if you're not 100% sure, getting your arms around it, it's just gonna be something you'll never regret. Thank you guys. Yeah.
Don't sweep this under the rug and hope it goes away like the Y2K bug. Sorry.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. I know you guys are getting busy too, so really appreciate you taking the time and educating all of us, and really excited to see what you guys come up with next. So thank you guys.
You as well. Thanks
Charlie.
Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to check out the link below to get started with our LIBOR mediation use case demo package that Alston and Bird helped us create. Thanks again to Jason and Gabriel for joining us. We'll see you on the next one.